more financially and fiscally responsible world, much less with the crypto anarchist ideologies early on.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, thanks for sharing your background. Thanks for building all these years. Thanks for trusting this process. I believe people who cover this as much builders as those that build technology will write. It's code. And yeah, it's a joy. It's a deep joy to have this here. It's I'm gonna do this exercise where I'm just gonna open it and then cooperative freedom lovers. So from that space, what's freedom? Um,
That's a great question. So in my estimation, freedom is our ability to act on our will in the world so long as we're not hurting other people. It's the ability to live free with our own volition, right? To go out into the world to do what we want to do without having institutions or other people coerce us or force us or compel us to do something that they want on threat of violence. So that's really what freedom is. Definitely a very practical and very axiomatic perspective. It typically, and this applies to individuals as well as it does institutions. But typically, when people talk about freedom, they talk about freedom from coercion from governments specifically, right? Because governments are the primary organization in society that prevent people from doing what they want to do or living how they want to because of the laws that they enact, right? And a lot of times, you probably heard the phrase before: legality does not equal morality, right? What that means is just because a law exists doesn't necessarily mean that law is also moral or represents morality, right? A lot of us would agree that murdering another person is immoral. So laws that back that make sense. But not all of us agree that possessing a pill, back turning it around full circle to my original arrest, that possessing a pill or trading that pill on the free market with another person for cash is immoral, right? Uh, People will go to the corner store and purchase a much more deadlier drug regularly called alcohol, yet that's legal in most places. So you see, this is the problem why we don't have freedom in the current society and social structure that we have, is because governments make a bunch of what I would call arbitrary laws, right? They're arbitrary in the sense that they're just what politicians have deemed to be right or wrong. Or if we want to take it down the path of living in a democratic republic, what the people have chosen, right? What the majority have chosen over the minority. But the reality is the most important element of society is the individual, and the individual is often at the whim of either the politician or the majority, right? I think we can all agree just because the majority thinks that something is right doesn't make it right, correct? So if the majority agreed that mass murder or the enslavement of a particular race or gender is acceptable, we would be like, no, that's not acceptable. Just a case in point to make this really concrete is the case of Nazi Germany, right? The Nazis were the government. There were anti-Semitic laws established in Nazi Germany, right? So whenever I hear people talk about, oh, it's the law, you have to follow the law, that just it makes sense in a civil society. Well, no, that's not the case. That'd be like saying, okay, if you lived in Nazi Germany, would we just follow all the anti-Semitic laws? Do we just shut our brains down, become brain dead zombies, and just obey? That's that's antithetical to everything that I know is in line with freedom, and it's also leads to a slippery slope to totalitarianism and fascism.
what's totalitarianism?
Yeah, so totalitarianism comes from the word total. So it refers to a government that has total control over every aspect of the society and the economy. So a totalitarian regime is a government that literally attempts, it's not saying they actually do, but they attempt to control as many aspects of their society and their economy as they can. So that's really totalitarianism in its essence. Now, I will say this: there are some sort of discussions we could have, or some considerations we could have about whether all governments fall into this same sort of camp of being absolutely evil and totalitarian. But I would certainly say there are gradations of governments that are not as bad. But I will say that all governments, by definition, and this is probably important for people to know. So a lot of people don't think about government in terms of what it actually is. So let's take the time to define that. I like to use Murray Rothbard's definition. For anybody who is not familiar with Rothbard, if you're not familiar with his work, he wrote a book called For a New Liberty. That's really good. It's a bit dated now. It was written in the 70s, but all the ideas are really good. He defined government, or the state, as a group of individuals who have a monopoly on force over a large territorial region. So by definition, governments are groups of individuals who monopolize the use of force, usually under the aegis of security or protecting the people, right? But they monopolize that use of force, and they say that they're the ones who are allowed to use it, and no one else is, unless they have permission to, for like security or defense or whatever reason.
On force
So
or
all
territory? On force or territory? Both.
Oh, so yeah. Well, they have a monopoly on force, on the use of force over a territorial region. Right. So they claim, they claim it's basically the same. You're right. They claim that they, just using the U.S. as an example. There's obviously a ton of other governments, but the U.S. claims to have a monopoly on force, the use of force, over their claimed territory, which is the United States, right, and the borders as they exist.
Can United States become the first network state, really?
So I'm so happy you're getting into this topic, of my favorite topics. So let's clarify first what we mean by a network state, right? If that makes sense, take the discussion first to get some clarification. A network state is really a